It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Colleen McCarty is here to talk about her first novel, Mounting the Whale. Welcome to the last show of 2013. As longtime listeners know, we take the last and first months of the year off to enjoy the holidays and gear up for the new season. We covered a lot of ground this year. Our first roundtable discussion that went off without any major hitches. We did lose a mixer, so may it rest in peace. I had some great on-location podcasts, and I think I have this Skype thing down somewhat. What was your favorite episode this year? Let me know by either emailing me, Craig@speakercraigprice.com, or posting on the Reality Check Podcast Facebook page. I would love to hear from you. Also, what kind of guests do you want to hear from next year? I'm hoping to get some top-notch folks, and any help from you would be great. So, are you recovering from Thanksgiving? Got all your shopping done from Black and Blue Friday? If you're still looking for something, have I got the podcast for you. My pal Colleen McCarty wrote her first novel, Mounting the Whale, out in stores on Thursday, December 5th. Listen to the description on the back cover. The self-made and affluent Pierce family is hurled into a seamy kidnapping plot when they receive a text message from Janine, the most troubled of all the Pierce children. Cartel got me, tell mom. The siblings, drowning in their own problems, are forced to focus on the task at hand, a half-cocked rescue mission that involves a borrowed yacht, a favor from a notorious drug kingpin, and a shocking reunion none of them expected. When the family decides to sneak into Mexico, Mother Cybil is forced to deal with the rival CEO, whom she's developed feelings for in secret. Her only son, Tom, is willing to risk bodily harm to save Janine from, while his other sisters, Carlyle and Valerie, suspect that the kidnapping is less than legitimate. The long sea voyage tests the limits of the family's already frail bonds, dark secrets of infertility, drugs, gambling, and extreme taxidermy begin to float to the surface, but nothing compares to what they begin to learn about their missing sister. If they're going to make it out alive, they must realize that they're fighting the same battles and facing life's greatest challenges: love, loneliness, and the struggle to find a place in the world. Amidst all the chaos, the Pierce family is brought face to face with the ugliness of Janine's addictions, the truth about their mother's fortune, and the most terrifying question of all: can you really save someone who doesn't want to be saved? Ooh, sounds cool. So Colleen is a great writer and an interesting lady, so let's find out more about her book, how she wrote it, on today's podcast with Colleen McCarty. Well, this thing's like 258 pages, and it's quite a book. This is your first one, so what is it about? Because unfortunately, it's 258 pages. I didn't get a chance to get through it. So explain to me what this Mounting the Whale is all about. It sounds like a sequel, a very bad sequel to 50 Shades of Grey.
I get that a lot. Actually, the mounting has sort of a double meaning. It's not actually physically getting on top of the whale, even though that does happen in the book, but it's more like mounting, like as in stuffing and mounting, like taxidermy. Yeah. So one of the characters in the book has a taxidermy fetish, which he kind of takes to the extreme and ends up hunting and killing and stuffing a blue whale.
Wow, and that's can't be easy to do, because that's the largest animal.
It's kind of like, yeah, he wanted to sort of get the ungettable because he's unsatiable, so he goes after the biggest thing he could possibly think of, which is a blue whale.
So tell me a little bit about what the book is about. Obviously it's quite involved. It's an actual novel. It's not just a book. It's a real, honest to goodness quality novel. Yeah,
it's about a dysfunctional family, which what kind of family isn't dysfunctional, But it's the Pierce family. The mother is the CEO of national granola bar chain Nature Bar, and she sort of finds out through a series of events that her middle daughter has just sent a text message saying that she's been kidnapped by a Mexican drug cartel. So the family is kind of wondering if it's real or not, because she's a drug addict and been in and out of rehab throughout her life, and so they kind of throw the threat aside, and then there are some other things that happen to make them think it's real. So they end up deciding not to call the police because they don't want to put the company in the spotlight, and they go on this daring sort of misadventure to try and rescue her from these kidnappers.
And it covers quite a bit of things. There's, from what I can tell, there's drugs, there's gambling. As you said, there's taxidermy. They deal with infertility and trophy hunting and all these things. So when you're starting to write the novel out, you have the story in place. How do you start doing the research for things? Because, I mean, you live in Oklahoma, correct?
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure trophy hunting is pretty much just deer.
Well, actually, it's encouraged to do any kind of hunting here.
Oh,
as
sure.
long as it's within the right, season. But there's no large game hunting here. So, yeah, I kind of had to do some research on that and, a lot of research on yachts, actually, because they end up sort of borrowing yacht from the character who's into taxidermy. He's a rival CEO of the mother, and so they're in love, and he loans her his yacht. And so I had to do all this research on yachts. I've never been on a yacht before, and so I mostly just I actually subscribed to this magazine called Showboating, which is a yachting magazine, and then also just did a bunch of research on the internet to find the correct dimensions for how big a yacht can be and how much does a yacht cost and what kind of things can you customize a yacht, or is it just sort of you buy it as it is, and all of that kind of stuff. I had to sort of figure that out as I went.
And for those of you, I'm here with Colleen McCarty. She's got a great new book called Mounting the Whale that's going to be out this week on the 5th. So only in 2 days, if you're listening to it the first day, which everyone should be listening to the podcast on the first day. But if you're listening to it after the 5th, it is out now in stores. And it's when you talk about dysfunctional families, we all have one. Were some of the characters based on people in your family?
Actually, yeah. I started the book because it was out of kind of a serious frustration that I had with some members of my family, and I just wanted to sort of play out a situation that, is something that people who are in a family with addicts are always sort of afraid of, that, your addict sister, your addict brother, your addict mom, whoever is going to end up in danger somehow because of the situation and the decisions that they're making. And I was just so frustrated that I didn't know what else to do, and I can't control them. And so I just wanted to play out, the situation. What would actually happen if my sibling or whoever in my family is struggling with addiction, whoever that is, what would happen if they actually did get into danger? And it's sort of like the ultimate cry wolf question of, they've been doing sort of these stupid things their whole life, and you never know if it's real or if they're just trying to get money out of you, or you sort of deal with that kind of manipulation. And so that's kind of how that happened.
So unless you're surrounded by addicts, which I hope you're not, but
no, I'm not.
We're going to assume that if the addict in question reads the book, they're going to go, hey, let's put 1 + 2, that equals me. What's going on? What was there any fallout? Did the person figure it out, and kind of was there fallout because of the fact that you're using semi-real situations?
Yeah. Yes, actually there was, and still is some fallout happening. I mean, one thing, if you're thinking about writing a novel and basing it on people in your real life, I would strongly encourage you not to share it with anyone until you are done and have a final draft, because even if they don't give you any feedback, you're going to be reading their face, you're going to be, asking them questions, and anything that you perceive from them as sort of, that they don't like, you're subconsciously, that's going to leak into your writing. So you write it the way that you need to write it the first time, and don't even tell anybody that you're doing it, honestly. I mean, that might be hard because you're probably excited about it. I know I was. I was loving everything I was writing, and my family knew I was working on it, but they didn't really ask me about it until I was ready to share it. And then when I was ready to share it, I mean, yeah, there were calls to the lawyer, there were threats, there were things that happened, but at the end of the day, we all realized that even though it started out being based on people in our lives, it ended up completely differently. Like the characters in the book aren't the people in my life. They're completely different people, even though that's where they started out. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Like the first chapter, it makes sense. It relates to this person, but then after that, it just goes off the charts. So
right. I mean, because they're faced with these kind of epic situations and a lot of details about who they are and how they look and their jobs are all different than my family, and so. They're kind of slightly recognizable. You know who they are when they read it, but I think they would definitely say that they don't act or do the things that the family in the book does. So it ended up, we're all kind of working through it. So it's interesting. And
it's funny because this is your first novel, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. So they don't know how well it's going to do. So their first assumption is that you're going to be on Oprah telling everybody about your secrets.
Right. I think that is where everyone's mind kind of goes. And I do believe in this story, and I believe that it's great and people will be entertained by it and people will, like it and love it, I hope. But I really think that is a very far off sort of dream. And if it does happen, then we'll all have to kind of sit down and figure out what we want to do at that point. But for now, I mean, it's on Amazon and it's on BarnesandNoble.com and it's available in some of my local stores here in Tulsa. But other than that, it's not going to be a national success overnight. And so we kind of have some time to decide what we want to do. Right.
And not that it couldn't be a success. It's just that the first assumption is they've got all these secrets that they're trying to keep from people. And it's in this book that maybe a couple hundred people get to see in the first couple months, which is great. And so that means, but they're thinking, next thing you know, Charlie Rose is coming on to interrogate the entire family.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably where most people's minds go when you say you're writing a book, because every single person in the world is going to read this. But in reality, it's a lot of hard work to get to that point. And as they say, how do you become an overnight success? You work every single day until that night, and then it becomes a success. So it's not like, I think, everybody thinks, oh my God, the whole world is going to know my secrets. But really, you should only really be concerned about the people that know me, because then they know who you are in the book. If they don't know me, then they don't know you. So it shouldn't really matter,
But how did you sit down with them and break the news? And how did you finally get to a point where they're maybe not thrilled about it, but they're at least accepting of the fact that this book is now in existence?
Right. I mean, the majority of my family is super supportive and great, and they've supported me from the beginning of the writing journey, and they knew that I was working on it. And when they read it, they were great. They said that they loved it. They were, so happy that I got such a great book written, and they were really happy for me. Of course, the people that don't have that aren't cast in the best light in their opinion in the book, they're the ones that are mad. And unfortunately, it wasn't a very well-planned sort of family meeting like I would have liked. It was more like, oh, Colleen's book's done. I just want to forward it to you. And then, all hell broke loose from there. So we're kind of still dealing with that. Thanksgiving's coming up, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh, it should be a great time of year to figure out this holiday season to release all this personal information. But again, it's really just there is something that started the thought, but it's not necessarily anywhere close to what your family resembles. So
right. I mean, that's the thing that I think most writers would say happens in the process of writing a novel. Is you start with one idea, and you start with the idea of your characters being certain people, and then as the book progresses, they sort of, I mean, it sounds really corny, but they start to make their own decisions and start to become their own people in your mind. And it's like, even though that was the impetus for beginning the book, that is not what ended up. And I think after we have some distance from that as a family, we'll be able to, accept that.
Okay. Well, let's get on to some happier thoughts then of the actual writing of the book. When you were thinking, when you have the novel, you have the story laid out. How often do you have to go back and try to make things work? Like as you move through a novel, something may be revealed in the third act or way at the end that you may want to go back to the beginning and give little hints to.
Yeah.
So how do you work that out? Is is there a structure that you have that you use? Is it just a bunch of cards on the floor that you're putting in line and you're stacking them up and then you write through it? Or do you just, like you said, you just let them live their life? You have an idea of where you want them to go and the characters kind of take control.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I start out with a synopsis. It's not super detailed. It's just one paragraph per chapter. So you're really super summarizing where you want the book to go, and you know where you want it to end, and you know where it begins, but you sort of have to fill in the dots of how you get, from scene A to scene B to scene C. You need to know those things when you start writing, because otherwise you're just going to sort of go off on this tangent and never get to the next point. So once you have that laid out and you start writing, it's sort of okay to be more flexible, because you have this sort of roadmap to lead you back to where you want to go. And then once you have a working first draft and things have come up they've like sort of bubbled up into the plot that you didn't expect, then you start rewriting. And that's the most horrible, awful process that I never like to do, but you have to, is when you start at the beginning and it's kind of like an epic game of memory where you're like, okay, I need to plant a seed here and here and here for that plot point that ends up happening later on. And you end up having to do that probably 5 or 6 times throughout the writing process of going back and making sure, the subtext is there and the scenes are there throughout and the character traits are there throughout. Like those, I actually do a rewrite for each of those things. So I'll do a rewrite just focusing on character traits. I'll do a rewrite just focusing on plot points and making sure that like I'm hinting at something or foreshadowing at something later on in the plot that needs to be there. So it's pretty intense, yeah.
So do you develop backstories that you write out that don't make the book, but backstories for every person and every interaction, so at least you have an idea, like a Bible to go back to help you make your book? Or
Charles Dickens was epic for having these like character sketches that would be almost as long as the books themselves. For me, I don't feel the need to be that detailed, but I almost have to write out a first draft before I get to that point. So I need to see where the character is going to end and what I really want their character arc to be. Where do I want them? I know I want them to start and where I want them to end, and what is the growth trajectory, so to speak. And then from there, I can kind of fill in some of those back details that would thicken up, I guess, who they are and their sort of personal story. So yeah, you find this character, this mom character, Cybil, who is a female CEO of a granola bar company, and you wonder, how did this person get here? Well, none of that stuff is in the book, but you have to sort of build that out to create this sort of really strong female personality. Like, what kind of situation did she grow up in? Who was she? What were her parents like? I had to answer those questions in order to sort of create her. So yeah, it does happen, but some interactions you don't need it for, and some you do. So I don't know.
No. And were there certain plot points that you, like Law and Order, grabbed from the headlines? Because some of the things that you talk about, the cartel kidnapping people, that seems to be a little more prevalent. As far as publicity wise, it's something you see a lot more in the news. It may not be actually be on the rise, but it is definitely something that when it happens, it makes the news.
Right.
So were there some things that you saw that as you were writing, maybe you went, hey, I am actually being relevant? Or
the cartel thing, I took that from something that happened, not necessarily, there was the threat that it was going to happen, but all of us knew that it wasn't, sort of. Does that make sense? In my real life, that actually happened.
But in real life, it was someone lying about being kidnapped.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's,
yes, and we all kind of knew that at the time. But I sort of played out like what would have happened if it was real. So that that's one of those things that's like, it happens to be buzzworthy at the time, I guess is what you mean. Like, it's sort of like something people are talking about. It's in Breaking Bad. It's a lot of like the war on drugs and all that stuff. People are talking about that. So it is something that people sort of recognize and they have a maybe already pre-established fear about. So I'm not saying I'm like playing on people's fears, but it is something that is intriguing, I guess, and that we think about maybe on a daily basis as a culture. So, yeah.
And also, we have to keep in mind that it was someone who had an addiction, and this is the kind of crap that they're going to make up, is what they see on the news.
Right, yeah. And so it's kind of coming full circle, like they're pulling it from that, and then you're putting it in the book, and then it's coming back out into the world. So it's sort of like going in, it's feeding itself, I guess, so to speak.
Now, at addiction, there's a lot of research on addiction that you can do, not only in your own life that you can pull on, but it's a well-established topic. But taxidermy is not. So
no.
so where do you find information on taxidermy? Well, how did you even get that to be part of the personality traits of this person that is extreme taxidermy guy? Yeah.
That's one of those things that sort of just appeared one day when I was writing, and I didn't have it in my synopsis, did not expect it at all. The entire character, his name is Todd Novak, and he is the CEO of Strength Bar, which I guess in our world today we would compare that to Power Bar. And he's like soared to the top, and he's this renowned Buddhist. Everyone knows him to be this very, stoic, meditation-centered, you get 5 minutes of uninterrupted eye contact as a reward for, completing a project, that type of manager and owner of a company, very left-wing sort of hippie type of guy. And then he has this deep, dark secret that he doesn't share with the public or with anyone, that he ends up sharing with Cybil, the mother character, that he has this past life where he was addicted to like big game hunting and kept having to hunt the next biggest thing, and which he takes her into the secret taxidermy room in his house and shows her all of his trophies that he sort of still revels in, even though he's a changed man, quote unquote.
That has to be a hell of a date. Let me take you to my dead animal room. You would look perfect right in the corner over there.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty creepy. And she sort of is a little bit scared of him, but that's kind of part of the attraction too. Like, he's this enigma. How can you be a Buddhist and tell everyone that you don't hurt, you never kill anything, you don't want to upset the balance of nature, and then you have this room where you've clearly very much upset the balance of nature. But it becomes this intriguing thing for her because he's telling her, you don't have to be who you have been. Like, change is possible. I've overcome this sort of dark side of myself, and I know you can too, because she feels disconnected and as if she can't sort of make the decision to go after her daughter because she doesn't feel like very close to anybody. She feels kind of cut off from the world. And so he's telling her, you can change, you can be the great mom that you want to be, you can go after your daughter, and we'll just have to be together after you get back. So that's what that's about.
Would you say that's an overall theme, is that change can happen?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the big takeaway, is that you don't have to be who you have been, that we all make choices every day, and the choices that you make don't define who you are. Like, you can make a different choice tomorrow. You can make a different choice today, and I think that's a big thing and I don't want to bring it all the way back. Like, the whole book is not about addiction or struggling with addiction, but I think that is something a lot of families struggle with, and that's something that has always been very frustrating for me, to have an addicted family member, and you just want to shake them and say, you don't have to live this life. You can be a different person, and people do it every day. And so that's kind of I would say that's the overall theme, yeah.
So how has writing this book changed you?
Honestly, I think I started doing it because I was so frustrated that I couldn't control them. I can't make those choices for them, and I can't make them want to be a different person. I can't force it on them, no matter how much I'm there supporting them or going to family week or doing whatever I need to be doing as a sibling or a daughter or whatever my relation is to that addicted person. I can't do it for them. And so that's where I started out as a person writing this book. And I think that I've come to that realization, like, I can't do it for you, even though I want to be able to, because it's very painful to watch you go through that. So that's probably what's changed for me, is letting that kind of go. Because I think most writers would say they're control freaks. I mean, that's why you become a writer, because you want to be able to control everything that happens in your little story. And so, yeah, just letting some of that go, I would say.
Well, it looks like a great book. Like I said, it's $2.58, which is great read. It's gonna be a great Christmas gift. This would be a great way to give somebody, hey, look, especially you can sneak it to the people that might need it the most, who may not recognize themselves in it.
I mean, that's what I think fiction can do for us, right, Craig, is just to say, like, oh, this isn't about you, and then hopefully they maybe will see some of themselves in some of the characters and maybe think that they could change too. Absolutely. That's what science fiction's been based on, is to show ourselves what we're doing wrong without us feeling that it's us. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all racism and all these horrible things that they use. We use aliens instead, so we can show, why would they treat those aliens so bad? And then they realize, maybe I shouldn't be treating anybody who's different than me bad. So hopefully that'll be a great takeaway. And so where can people find the book? That's the key. Right. So the book is available on Amazon.com as a Kindle and as a paperback, and also it is available on the Nook, on BarnesandNoble.com, and then there's a couple local stores here in Tulsa. I don't know if any Tulsans are listening, but you can pick it up at Decopolis or Dwelling Spaces or Made the Indie Emporium shop. And where can people find more information about you? My website and blog is Colleen-McCarty.com, and I'm on Twitter quite frequently. My name is @Colleen_McCarty. Well, Colleen, I wish you nothing but luck and goodwill towards the book. I hope you make a sequel, but it doesn't alienate the rest of the family. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's our show. Thanks again to Colleen. That's it for 2013. A great year overall. Our 100th episode, the round table, fantastic guests. We got an award nomination, and we got listeners like you. Well, does PBS own that? Anyway, have a great holiday season and see you next year.